Okay, so this video is going to be on my race. Um, so, um, Being originally from Jamaica, um, in Jamaica, I was typically called white because my complexion was a lot lighter than the other Jamaicans, who uh, were many of them a higher percentage of African than I am. But in the US, I'd go to a pub and the fellow would say, "Hey, you're black." Or a girl would see me and then would call me Tyrone the Science Guy, which is the black analog to Bill Nye. And so what I am is a black-white hybrid, which is typically in America called a light skin, right? And so this is a decent picture of me, right? Um, and so my genetic makeup consists of European Irish, European Spanish, which are my white, and then of course black or African. And so I'm this emergent hybrid, which could typically be called a light skin. And so if you look at the texture of my hair, it's curly, right? If you look at the thickness of my nose and its structure, it looks like a genetically black nose. If you look at the thickness of my lips and their structure, it looks like a black man's lips, not a white man's. You look at my facial hair, you look at my face in this, I look like a light skinned black man, right? So um, I'm both black and white, right? And so when my body's impinged by solar radiation, I turn into this golden brown kind of structure, right? Um, anyway, um, anyway, I'm a black white hybrid. And so a whole lot of very rotten females, um, have a whole lot of, rotten approaches to things. And so this is going to get a bit dark, but there's a pornographic website called black.com. This sort of stereotype of an African man being more endowed, propagates through female consciousness, right? And it is true because the largest bone pressed erect length average on the entire planet is in Sudan, Africa, in which that average is 7.1 inches. Whereas in the US, the average is between 5.1 and 5.6 inches erect. And then in India, it's like 5.12 inches erect. And so, for any female consciousnesses thinking that being endowed is correlated with melanin, it is not. Um, Both African men and Indian men have melanin, which was a mutation that was appropriate for the more intense solar radiation received at those somewhat equatorial regions of the planet Earth, right? But Sudan, Africa was generally hotter on average than India. And so the real causative traits to larger on average size due to evolution is actually temperature of the region in which you're evolving. If it's really hot, and you're like having to have an active lifestyle and you're getting good nutrition and your body's doing the form of homeostasis where because it's hot the blood is always at the surface of the skin, uh, over time your genitalia will be engorged with more blood as compared to a species evolving in a temperate region where the homeostasis is the reverse. The blood is keeping towards the internals of the body. And so, obviously, every man who deals with winter knows that you experience shrinkage of your dick because it's saying the blood needs to keep internal so you don't lose heat to the environment. And so, the causative thing with this size thing isn't melanin; it's just temperature. And if a race evolved in a very hot place, they'll be bigger or more endowed in dick size than a race that evolved in a more temperate than in a more temperate place, right? Anyway, because But anyway, what I'm touching on is that it's all just gone rotten. So anyway, if you look at this picture of me, you might be like, oh, he's white or something. Maybe he's not that hung. Or like, oh, he has white in him, so maybe he's not that hung. Right? If you're a girl, right? Oh, I don't see a bulge. And so what is true about me is that I'm a 6'4" mixed guy, right? Um, and so, uh, you know, what pornography may do to female brains is that they may not understand that majority of guys are growers, right? Not showers. Um, and so the things that are true for me is that I'm a 6'4" brown man, or could be called a light skin. And then my flaccid is usually like 5 to 5.5 from pelvic bone to head, right? But then my bone pressed erect length, without exaggerating, is actually at least 9. Um, and 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 so basically, the Gaussian the Gaussian of 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 bone pressed erect lengths in the U.S. is between 5.1 and 5.6 inches. And so if you ask what percentile is 9 inches bone pressed erect, on that Gaussian, the answer is above the 99.99th percentile, such that less than 0.01% of men in the US are my size, right? Um, and so it means if you sample 1,000 Americans, statistically, only one of them may be 9, or none of them may be 9. They'd all be smaller, right? But as per pornography and camera angles and exaggeration and vacuum pumps that the actors use and injections and SLR, which decouples the dick from where it's attached to the pelvic bone, which makes it hang when erect instead of standing out, right? And adds like 1 to 2 inches of length for visual effect. Danny D, who is a white porn star, did an SLR, and so did Julio Gomez, and they have that same kind of thing, right? So anyway, and then Brickzilla, his thickness is fake. His early appearances, he wasn't as big, but actually they do this thing called injections, where they use injectables to enhance their thickness or their size, and they also use a vacuum pump to enhance the blood flow to make their thickness and length bigger, right? And so ultimately, I'm happy with being a 9 BPEL, right? But that's, because it's extremely rare to be 9, right? For reference, Julio Gomez, without like this SLR thing or vacuum pump or injections, is actually in the range of a 9 to 9.5 BPEL, and then I'm a 9 BPEL. So, right? And so with my size, my sexual partners have been a 5'10", 160-pound woman who was heavy on the backside, and the first time her and I were successful, my size brought her to orgasm 4 times before I finished, right? And so this other thing is that what females need to understand is that the structure of the female body is the following. Um, uh, when when uh, when um, when 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 a female becomes aroused, their vagina elongates, and so basically the cervix goes deeper inside the vagina. And so 9 inches bone pressed from pelvic bone to head, you put the entirety of that inside a female vagina. When the vagina is even aroused, uh, uh, to accommodate sex, and therefore the cervix is deeper inside, that length is still going to hit the cervix. And so this whole thing with exaggerated sizes of 12 inches, 13 inches, 14 inches, again, Julio has said he's 14 inches, but if you pause the frames of any scenes with him, you see he's actually a 9 to 9.5 BPEL, right? And then he did SLR, which adds like 1 to 2 inches and makes him hang, right? Anyway, so anyway, um, and so 9 is gonna hit your cervix. You don't need any more length than 9. Thickness is nice, right? And so uh, and so that's also a factor. Like, are you 9 and thin, or 9 and thick? And so I'm fortunate, and so my girth circumference at the head of my dick is like a circle with diameter 2.4 inches, and then circumference 7.5 inches, which is quite thick. And so I've had scenarios where a female needs to utilize lube for my dick to even go in, right? And so I'm 9 BPL, and then my head is thick, right? Um, and so anyway, by sort of natural selection, evolution, and the universe, I evolved to have those measurements, which actually, make a woman feel amazing. I'm quite big. But anyway, if you saw me walking around flaccid, um, or if you see me doing soccer tricks and there's no bulge in my pants, or doing a flying kick, it's because my flaccid is usually between 5 and 5.5 inches. Now, the universe is such that there exist male consciousnesses that is their full erect is between 5 and 5.5 inches, whereas that is my flaccid. So anyway, and so I don't think I'm better than guys that are less endowed than me. I just am trying to say true things because I think the world is just really quite rotten. And so, I've been to a place and I've seen an attractive woman. I watched her, uh, and she was only talking to black men. She did not talk to me. Um, and she might be like, "Oh, well, he has white in him," and so on. But statistically, right? Sudan, Africa is the country, um, with the largest average BPEL, and that average is only 7.1. And so me at 9, right? Uh, uh, I actually uh, am larger than even the majority of fully African men, right? Even though I have white in me. Anyway, um, so um, anyway, um, so anyway, uh, females select for many things if they just want, great sex and so on, and or whatever. They may select for size, and they want some partner that can blow their mind sexually. You know, I am that person, uh, but I don't know. Anyway, Deus Ex Machina out.